Great. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Opus webinar. This one is called How to Create Great Training Content. If you attended our webinar last week, the theme for May is that we're going back to basics. Last week, we dove deep into the data, and this week, we're going to sit with two instructional design experts to really explore what makes training truly great. As a few housekeeping notes, questions and comments are always welcome. In the Riverside studio, you do have the opportunity to chat, and you also have the opportunity to request a live call-in, which will get you into the studio, so you can ask your question live. A recap of the session will be posted on our blog and will be emailed you directly, so if you have to pop out of the session, no worries, no hard feelings. A quick overview of what we're going to cover today. How to build great training content. This is regardless of your LMS or training format. The nice thing here with our two experts is that they've worked across a variety of tools. They're truly experts in their field. We'll also cover how hospitality instructional designers create training content across a variety of mediums, so taking into consideration paper, digital, video, and then best practices and tools you can use to enhance any training. Without further ado, I'd love to pass the mic to our awesome panelist, Matt. Take it away.
Thanks. Matt Nelson. I'm the founder and CEO of Modern Training. We're based in Colorado, and we serve a lot of food and beverage and retail companies, but really we'll make training for anyone. My background is growing up in kitchens and cooking, understand operations really well, and really we're here to try to take some of the pain away from getting new learning experiences out into the field in any way we can do that. A lot of what we do is content creation, and that's where I think a lot of what I'm going to talk about today comes into play. But we also do a lot of services, including strategy. And so I think one of the things I want to talk about a little bit today is to have great content, you have to know, is the ladder leaning up against the right wall? And great content has to match what the field needs and the business needs and the field wants. Excited to talk about this. I don't know if I'm going to be able to stick to the basics or not, but I can't wait to go through it all with everyone, including you, Ashley.
Yeah, Matt, I don't think we ever stick to basics when we have these conversations. I guarantee we will sidetrack or rabbit trail at some point. But I'm Ashlea McMahel. I'm the manager of instructional design or training design at Founders Table, which services both Chopped and Dos Toros. 7+ years of experience doing this across multiple different companies, including like telecoms and then also food with Red Robin. So just very excited to talk about how what I thought I knew 7 years ago has evolved into like where we are at now.
Awesome. Thank you both. Before we dive in to part one, I wanted to set some context that Chopped is an Opus customer. You guys were chosen to be part of this webinar because you've done a really great job of mapping out your training programs in Opus. And something we get a lot of questions about too is like, how do I get my content from point A to point B on the Opus training platform, but also designed so that it's a really engaging experience for trainees. And then Matt from Modern Training, you actually work with a few of Opus customers as consultants on their training strategy at large. Cool. So for part one, something that I want to call out is when I pitched Ashley and Matt this webinar, they said that we don't necessarily build training, we design learning experiences. For everyone in the audience, depending on how you look at training, there's barriers either way to building good content. Expertise, the medium, the tools and resources at your disposal. And Ashley and Matt are here to kind of talk more on like the conceptual and then dive into how they actually execute this in a variety of tools. So let me move on. To set the stage, I wanted to show off a preview of Founders Table or CHOP's training. This is an example of their prep training and Opus. Building out this content is like no easy feat, and this is the final product of Ashley's approach, which we're going to get into. But this is a really great example of a module that's branded, it's engaging, it has a good use of quizzes, it shows up, it really embraces micro learning. So this is not meant to be completed all at once by a trainee, but it's meant to enhance the training that they're learning on the job. All right, Ashley, I'll pitch it off to you to talk about Map It.
Okay, great. We, at least from my approach, are going to be discussing the training that I do as a whole from what I've learned several years ago, which is from the book Map It. And essentially, it just asks the question, why training, not yes, always to training. So like as an instructional designer, I think sometimes it can feel like you're an order taker and you're just expected to like say yes and move forward. And I think we need to challenge that approach in that sometimes training is not always the answer or the only answer. And so just like teaching you how to ask the questions that you need to ask to decide if training is the right solution and what else you can do. Because there are often operational solutions that would solve like the behavior versus just throwing a job aid at someone. And I know, Matt, you were going to like define engaging training because we've said that this whole thing is about how to create engaging training. So I'll let you do that.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, for me, it all starts with are we doing the right thing? And so let's say that training is the solution. I think a lot of people in the audience are here, as an L&D leader or part of an L&D team. And I do want to say, like, I really think that this conversation that we're having today is appropriate and relevant to people across, a range of responsibilities in L&D. I think whether you're an instructional designer and you are showing up today to say, what does great content look like? Or if you're an L&D leader, a director, a VP, something along those lines where you're going, hey, how are we going to get people to engage with training? So if you're attracted to the name of the webinar today and what makes great training, to me, there's really two things that make it great. One is, do the learners like it? I mean, that's the first place to go. Who are we delivering this to, right? So are they enjoying it? And then two, do they know how to do their jobs after? Are they learning the right things at the right time? And are they learning, are we asking them to learn too much? So for me, that's what great training is. It's content that content as part of a larger learning experience that they're really enjoying and stay curious in, and want to keep going, and then really feel confident that they know how to do their job. If we can do that, if we can reinforce that feeling that people get on day one, that they made the right choice in taking this job with you, and that they're going to know how to do their job, they're going to feel confident, they're not going to make a bunch of mistakes, they're not going to get funny looks from customers or coworkers, then that's great training. So really, I think looking at it in terms of what does the content look like and how is it engaging, all the way into what does a whole training program look like and what is the learning experience in total.
Thanks for defining that, Matt. That was a great explanation.
That's also the long definition.
Yeah. To clarify, Map It is a really amazing book on instructional design. Maybe if you're familiar with it, let us know. We're pulling out these examples because they will come back out later. But moving on, I wanted to share a quick preview of a takeaway we'll have at the end of the webinar. Modern Training was generous enough to share this template of a learning experience map that they use with their clients with a bunch of discovery questions that help them get a better idea of what problem they're actually trying to solve for their clients.
Yeah, and to be clear, that's something that we use for discovery, but the point of sharing it today is that everybody, will have an opportunity to, whether you've used Trello before or not, to have access to this template so that you can add it to your current Trello experience or sign up for a free account, and you can build your own board based on this template. You can go a lot deeper into this, but I think this is a great place to start and a great tool to take away for everybody that's attending today, to say, are we asking all the questions we need to ask to make great training?
Great. Without further ado, part two. So a lot of the time when we were breaking up the session, I thought it was good to go through the practical and the conceptual when thinking about how modern training versus founders table or chopped um, approaches building new training and the how we would kind of go through their process. So for modern training, as we just shared, they have a template that they go through with their clients to during discovery to ask the right questions. And with Founders Table, we just showed the map it sort of approach and how Ashley kind of aligns her thinking when she's building new content at Chopped. Cool. Matt, I'll pass it off to you to talk about how you build out training in Storyline.
Yeah, that sounds great. Before you launch that, I'm just to kind of set this up. Again, good training to me or good content to me involves the whole learning experience. In fact, on our team, late last year, we changed all of our job titles from content designers to LX designers. So I use that word LX a lot because I really want to think about the whole experience that people who are working for you get out of their learning and how it keeps driving them forwards. So that experience has to start with, asking the right questions and making sure it's in great alignment. And again, when we look at that Trello template a little bit later, and then on your own, there's just a lot of prompts in there that ask, what do you need? What are you trying to accomplish here? So when we talk to our clients about what their needs are, similarly in your organization, you can ask the same thing, whether you're getting ready to start a big new initiative to maybe create a training program, a learning experience that you don't have yet, or a big initiative because you're tearing it all down and starting from scratch, or if you're just making some updates, or if there's something new to the operation that you need to create new training for. I mean, there's so many different reasons why you'd want to kind of go through this exercise of asking all these questions and making sure that you're set up like Mapit does to make sure that what you deliver is what is actually going to have the biggest impact and it's the right thing that you need. So once you have asked all the right questions and you go, okay, we need some content, then I think you need to ask yourself, like, what is that content supposed to do? Teach them how to do their job, again, at the right time. One thing we talk about a lot with clients right now is, do they have to learn this right now or not? And that's one of the most challenging questions that we can ask. So, I've been in restaurants for a long time. I mean, I think coming up on 30 years here that in some way I've been working in restaurants. And historically, there's a lot of 5-day server training programs out there. I think either you have it now or you've been through it. And we try to teach 100% of the skills that people need to learn in 4 or 5 days of onboarding. And then it stops and they're on the schedule and they're just ready to go. And they're just like every other employee. So one of the first things we ask is, do they have to learn this right now? Or can we just have lots of repetition on the core skills and maybe get them on the schedule in a day or two as a contributor and then continue to build skills after that? And one thing that really does too is help them stay engaged. So when we're talking about learning experience, engagement for me means, do they have the right amount of training at the right time? And does it keep going? I think that's one way to keep people engaged. Another way to keep people engaged is how you design and develop the content, right? So I have a couple examples here. One way to do that is something that's really visually immersive. And although the content that we're going to look at right now when we open up this short demo on this road rage course that we've been developing is not content that you would host on the Opus app. It is, this is made in Articulate Storyline. So it gives you an opportunity to have touch interactions and a lot of visuals. So let's look at that first, and then we'll talk about some other ways to make content engaging. Yeah, so here we are. It's a safety course on road rage. This is for brands that have, drivers or using third parties. You can go ahead and hit that right arrow. Sarah, we're setting it up. What's the situation? Um, Now, if you just deliver this in text of saying like, uh, you know, if you encounter road rage, follow these 6 steps. The information is being shared, but not necessarily in a way that sticks, right? So when we're looking at engaging content and great training, one way that you can do that is by making it very visual and immersive. Just by taking this course, people can pretty easily see um, what situation they're going to be using this in and what it looks like, right? And then, of course, we just ask some follow-up questions to keep them engaged that way too. So you can close out of that, Sarah. I mean, that's just one example of visually immersive, visually engaging content. But really, and you can head over to the next example in Opus. One thing that we're trying to do a lot right now is engage learners by giving them situational context. And so looking at these 2 screens from this incredibly comprehensive 2-slide course that I made in Opus, really those 2 screens that you're looking at with the graphics are the same exact information, just presented 2 different ways. And one way is a little bit more traditional and aligned with kind of an SOP approach. So if you look at that first screen, how to start a new order in the POS, I imagine quite a few of you have some kind of training around using a POS, starting at the beginning, how to start a new order. So if you're lucky enough to have all your operating procedures documented, then you might have steps 1 through 7 here on how to start an order. You can deliver that as text, but I would argue that giving people a little bit of idea of when they use this just helps repackage that information in a way that lets people know how they're going to apply that in a shift, right? So trying to move, whether it's no matter what platform you're in, how you're delivering content, in person, any of that, we're always trying to learn in the flow of work. So someone could be on a phone in Opus in this course, very different experience of just saying step 1, log into the POS using your employee number. And you can see like that text is probably copied and pasted from an SOP guide, right? So it's very wordy, very text heavy. Instead, on the second slide, you can see just a different example, giving them some situational context. Let's pretend, right? I mean, this is what it's all about. So just by saying, hey, you're working at the register, you're a cashier, and the first customers of the day are walking up. First guests, they're going to have to order, so you have to start an order in the POS. I think just kind of wrapping that information in this situational context helps people say, I know when I'm going to use this, and then later when they're actually in that situation that they can recall this information a little bit better. So those are just 2 examples, one with visuals, one with situational context on how to make content a little bit more engaging.
I love this example, Matt. I wanted to point out that between the second and the third screen, or I guess like example A and example B, example B feels a little bit more personalized because as the trainee reads through the screen, they're going to feel as if they're being talked to directly rather than just like receiving a traditional SOP where it could have come from a piece of paper versus Opus and it would still be the same.
Yeah, I love that call out. Like, actually, I mean, I am kind of low key thinking about profitability too here, because when we're writing content and delivering content, we're always thinking like, look, we know labor costs are increasing. I think that's great. I think it's great to pay people more, especially in the restaurant industry, saying, how many of us showed up for Thanksgiving and somebody said, when are you going to get a real job, right? Well, working in food and beverage is a real job now, and people get paid a lot more. And I think the experience across the board is improving. But if they're going to get paid more, we can expect more from them too, is the hope, right? So you can train more, hold them to standards. Nevertheless, if you're paying people $20 an hour instead of $2.13 an hour, then, you're going to have to find some efficiencies. I think it's very possible with tech. I mean, if you're going to make an investment in something like Opus or any other platform that you're using, if you're going to make that investment, you should get a little bit of ROI by some efficiencies with labor. And so if you're delivering your content in kind of this, framework of I'm your trainer talking to you, then maybe you don't need that actual trainer for 40 hours of, added time. Maybe it's something more like 20 hours, and that live trainer, that certified trainer, whoever's training them in the field, is a little bit more focused on observation and coaching and not delivering, first contact information.
Ashley, I see you nodding. I know that these are things that you're probably thinking through. It's like the soft side of building training content. Of course, like there's the subject matter, and trying to make sure that, you know, um, trainees have the information that they need to do their jobs, but also the way that it's kind of told to them in sort of a story. Is that something that you also kind of keep top of mind?
Yeah, so it just depends on like the type of role. We try to use like engaging imagery, which you'll see when we're looking at an example of how, even just talking conceptually, we try to make it somewhat engaging when we're looking at it in a practical setting of Opus. But when we're trying to talk to the different platforms, I'm always trying to keep in mind how can, even just going off of what Matt originally said of like, we are paying more and now we need to like kind of up our ROI on our training. So how can I make this modular so that it works for everyone, but still make it feel personalized, which is generally where we bring in videos of examples of people executing it. So yes, you've read it and you've read the practical tools, but it doesn't really click until you actually watch it happen. But I don't necessarily need to wait until you can see it happen in person, because sometimes trying to fabricate like a scenario right on schedule doesn't work. So we try to include those filmed videos of here's what a scenario should look like and how we want it to go to really reinforce what you just read. And then there's like a job aid for later to try to reference back to.
Totally. We've been thinking a lot about this at Opus in terms of how do we guide our customers to build content that's better in Opus, given like all of the media tools they have at your disposal. So what's the best way to use images? What's the best way to use videos? I think that we talk to a lot of like admins, they just want to put in everything because they want it to be engaging, but there is a delicate balance of finding the right amount so that it's not distracting, it's still personalized, and it reinforces like the actual content rather than like distract from it.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Awesome. So Ashley, thank you so much for putting together a really awesome module for us, kind of outlining your approach as inspired by Mapit. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the Opus Builder so we can go through it screen by screen.
Great. So we basically put this together for the purpose of being able to talk through a very high-level conceptual idea in a practical way. So I'm going to be using very silly examples just to make it easier for us. But the reason I was introduced to Mapit several years ago in a previous role, and what I love about it is that it doesn't come at it from the standpoint of, even though we are training professionals, training is not always what's going to solve the solution. If someone has a bad attitude, I cannot fix a bad attitude with a job aid. If the environment that they're working in is not setting them up for success, my training is never going to fix it 100%. It might move the needle by me educating them, but there is a role that we play on like an operational side of trying to make the experience better. So what I love about Mapit is that it talks you through deciding whether or not training is the right solution for you. And then in the second part of this, we'll look at, okay, yes, it is. Now what do I do? Which really piggybacks really well off of what Matt put together with the Trello board. And I think if you ever get this Mapit book or even just check out the job aids that they have available online, they align so well. But for this example, I'm going to look at the idea of if my apartment complex is consistently emailing me about all of our parking violations, what's the solution if they come to me as a learning professional saying I need help? Because clearly sending out 20 emails is not an effective way to get someone to do something. And this happens often in like a professional environment as well. We don't just email our managers and tell them what to do. We also set them up for success by training their team members. Because if I just email a manager over and over and say, don't do this, that's not really working for them. We want them on the line. We want them working with their team members. So emailing them is not effective. So let's say they come to me at my apartment complex and they are looking to reiterate the parking rules and they're trying to figure out what's the best solution for us. What I'm going to realize is our problem is getting all of the residents to consistently and accurately adhere to the parking rules is my problem. Once I've identified my problem, I can then start to understand is the problem going to be solved by training or not? So based on this problem, I would not immediately say that training would be my solution. Before I do anything, I would understand why my end user isn't adhering to their rules. And Matt even touched on this as well. I think the very first step should always be talking to the people in the current position. So, for example, in my current role, I spent a week in restaurants learning how to do what they do, working on a line. I also have experience working in a very similar customer role at another company. And so I've been in their position before. I've been on the back line making salads, and I understand what gets in the way, which generally is just customer volume. But in this scenario, I would talk to my neighbors because they're my end users and figure out why they're not following the guidelines. And I would discover that a lot of them in this area work from home, and therefore they're not going to move their car every single day when they work from home because they don't always need to go somewhere. And now that I've figured this out of why am I not moving my car every day, it's not that it's a lack of understanding of the rule. There's no what's in it for me for them. There's no need on their end. So they don't understand the consequences, or they don't understand the repercussions of not moving their car. It's a very silly example, but we're going to keep going with it. So now I understand that their problem is not adhering to parking rules because they're not leaving the house all the time, so they're not going to move their car. I'm going to go back to my subject matter expert, which in this case is my apartment, and I'm going to ask them why this is necessary. Because I do think sometimes there are rules that can be implemented that are just not vital and they're just there to be there because it's a rule we used to have, like the size of earrings that you were used to wear. We've really changed how the employee standards around uniforms at Chopped, because we understand that what used to be relevant and what made sense before, just maybe we're okay with being a little more lenient. And so I would talk to my complex and see, why is it vital? What happens when it's not followed, as a repercussion for my complex? And then how does that actually impact the end users first? So basically, what's the consequence that my complex is willing to put into place? So what's that accountability piece? Once I've answered these questions, I would come back and say, after answering everything, I understand why people aren't moving. And the real problem is that there's not enough spaces. So where they're not moving from is not a regular space, it's a handicap space. And so that's the real issue that we were trying to get to in the very first place, of they're not adhering to parking rules. That's not actually the issue. It's that they are getting complaints about the handicap parking spaces always being full. And so what my solutions would be in this scenario would be to first start with, do we have space for more handicap parking spaces? If no one's inappropriately parking them and they have got their signage, from an operational perspective, could we just solve the problem with more spaces? And then how do I better educate for the lack of spaces on why you should be moving out of those if it's not vitally necessary that you be parking there? So to really sum this all up, essentially, our job is not to be a yes man and always say, yes, we need training. When someone comes to us and they say we need training, our job is to take a step back and say, why do you need training? So that we can make sure that when we're actually creating training solutions, we're solving the real problem, not just the Band-Aid. So on the next course, we're going to look at designing training just super quickly and talk about, similar to what Matt talked about, of how I put training together. And there's another job aid in the Map It book that you can follow. And this will walk you through some additional questions. And I think this is really where you could plug in Matt's Trello board and ask yourself, okay, now that I know I need training, what do I do and what needs to be included and what does it need to look like and what's my medium. So if we continue on this previous example, I've learned that despite adding more spaces to our complex, people are still parking illegally in spaces, even though they don't have signage for it. So they're not supposed to be parking there. My training solution would not just be to reiterate the rules, because the emails they sent 20 times already didn't work. So it's not me shoving the rules back at them. It's reminding them of the consequences, which I think is a really great thing that MapIt does, is it flips it on its head. It's not how do I deliver a list of rules. It's how do I get you to understand what happens when you don't follow the process I'm about to tell you about. So in this case, similar to what Matt had put together in a storyline course, I would probably also use storyline in this example, because it does give you that gamification option where it feels like you're playing an interactive game. I'd put some parking spaces in there and tell them, based on our community map, where do you want to park? When they pick the wrong spot, I would pop it up and say, well, by the way, this neighbor over here actually really needs this spot because whatever reason, I just said I broke my leg last year. So I broke my leg and now I can't get out to my car, and I need to be able to be really close to my spot and not have to walk 20 paces over. So instead of me throwing the rules back at you, which you really don't need, you need to understand the consequences. And that's how I'm going to better educate you and train you. And then at the end, I'll throw you a job aid that has all of your parking rules for you to reference. But once you really understand the consequences, I think it's reinforcing that WIFM, the what's in it for me, that we look for. And that is MapIt as a whole in a very high level overview. Highly recommend the book though.
Ashley, thank you for walking through all of that. I want to pause with the audience to make sure that we're getting any questions. Does anybody have any questions? Or you can drop them in the chat if you want, or you can request a live call-in. I know we just went through a good chunk of content, and I also want to preface that the resources that we shared at the beginning will be included in the recap so that you can dive into them separately. But Ashley, I love the way that you laid this out, especially in the Opus Builder is kind of a natural storytelling tool. Something that you touched on that I want to go a little bit deeper on is this concept of what's in it for me.
I think it's towards the end. But the what's in it for me is really just, at the end of the day, I can tell you exactly why I require something. I can tell you a standard all day, every day. And I don't think it'll resonate with you until you understand the why. And not just the why it's important to our company, but why it should be important to you as an employee or as a team member and a part of our organization. So a great example of this at Chopped is our hand washing training. I can tell you till I'm blue in the face, and I can put up as many signs as I want to tell you that you need to wash your hands. But until you understand how you can affect not just our customers, but also our brand as a whole, think about not washing your hands. You cause a sickness you had a day ago to pass on to another customer, and then our stock plummets, which would never happen at Chop. But if that did happen, simply because you didn't follow a rule, you've affected all these other things. And I think providing that real world scenario of what could happen, someone getting deathly ill, worst case actual death because you fail to follow a standard that we've set out, provides the context for whatever you're about to tell them about the rules, and provides that insight on, this is not just something I'm being told to follow arbitrarily, being told to follow it so that I'm upholding our standards and keeping people safe and keeping people happy with our brand so that they keep coming back. Because at the end of the day, the brand is what pays your paycheck too.
Matt, I want to pass it off to you. In terms of when you work with clients, do they have all of these figured out before they come to the table with hey, we need training?
No, but that's okay. So I can't tell you how many times over the last 11 years that that I've been in a conversation with, someone new, and they say, this is really embarrassing, but we don't have this, or don't make fun of us when you see what I send you, or I don't even want to send you anything that we currently have because it's terrible. I mean, that happens all the time. And so I just want to say to everybody, hopefully this makes you feel better. We're all in the same boat. Like, it's okay. You're not in last place. Um, but it does tell me though that it's important work. And I know again that sometimes everybody just feels like they're behind if they could only have time to make the content that they need. And that's true. Like, I mean, look, we create a massive amount of content every year at our company, and the ratio of like long-term initiatives that we work on versus I need this right now has definitely kind of changed a little bit, especially over the last couple of years. And I think already this year we've had probably 5 projects that have been, um, you know, that have had a 30-day or shorter term, and 2 of those have been pretty massive content lifts. Um, so I understand they need to get the content out, but if you have the time to, what stood out to me, Ashley, from what you were talking about with the parking is go ask people why they're not parking. If you can talk to the people in the field, it's really refreshing because every day that we're not in the field is a day that we're disconnected from what's really going on. So I really like the idea of talking to the people that you're serving to find out what's going to help them. I had a GM 20 years ago who said, you either don't know or you don't care. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. It could be that we don't know, and maybe that's the problem. So usually in a training role, I always blame myself first if people aren't performing what they're supposed to, because it means that I missed on the content that I made or the way that I delivered it or just being a good listener.
That was such a good point too in the example that you shared, Ashley, of like going directly to the source and getting intel to kind of inform you. I think um, while we position this webinar as like how to create great training content, really like what the title should have been is how to like solve business problems. Instructional designers, in the process of creating all this content, you become experts in the business, and you have to kind of assemble the entire case and know everyone's perspective before you even go into designing the actual training. Awesome. I'm gonna pause. If we have any questions from the audience, just checking. Cool. No, going once, going twice.
We must be nailing it.
We must be. That's what I tell myself.
That's my takeaway.
Great. Well, if you want to refer back to that module, we'll include it as a takeaway in the blog recap. So it's going to be here. Awesome. Moving on to part 3, evolving training methods. This is something that we get asked about all the time at Opus. I think a lot of the times it's easy to feel like you're behind the curve on like the newest training tools. Should I be using AI? Should I have an immersive, like where you showed a storyline? Like, am I not doing enough? It's always easy to feel that way. But really, I think what we try to position this attitude is around adapting with your business needs and making sure that you still have the frontline employee in mind at all times. I think that when we watch our customers build training, they feel this pressure to like check the box. And so when we launch new features or we talk about AI Assist, I think they feel overwhelmed at times of like, should I be using this and what are the benefits? Ashley, as you've kind of grown in your career as an instructional designer, how do you feel when you see new tools enter the market?
I think it's really exciting because I think new tools help bring us out of like, ideally, usually when you've got someone in a like instructional design position, they're often here because they're excited about training. They want to make training fun, and they're generally very creative people. And so when new tools come out, I think it kind of helps us like shake off some of the stagnant like feelings that we've gotten stuck into, and you get excited even if you don't end up using that new tool. So even if someone was to look at Opus and say that's really cool, I can't sign up with them, but I can still implement in this other option that I'm using, like some of the really cool features that they're putting out there, like implementing more AI whenever you can to like just better like update your writing, or even just getting involved like with your marketing department to create better like graphics so that things feel more aligned from what an external customer sees and your employees, which realistically are your internal customers, see. So I get very excited when new tools hit the market.
Matt, what do you think about new tools and technologies that are available to instructional designers? I think on the one hand, it's great because you can see that there is this investment in L&D or in learning experiences that seems to be like increasing, but at the same time, you don't have to use every single one.
Yeah, I mean, look, the customers are usually more knowledgeable than we are, right? So, and in this case, our customers are the people working in the field, and they know about AI, and they know about mobile learning, and they know about, VR or mixed reality. So, um, I think we all feel this pressure, like, oh, I gotta use AI. And then, you spend a day on it and you go, okay, great. ChatGPT can write storyboards for me now. Has anybody moved past that? And so I think sometimes when there's new tools, we get through step one, and then we're overwhelmed, or either by the tool, or we're overwhelmed just by the amount of work that we have to do. Um, so, hopefully there's a way to dive a little bit deeper into it. But I think there's an expectation that we continue to evolve, and that tech and platforms and tools are maybe out, it feels like we're being outpaced a little bit, but we have to find a way to keep pace. We we still make job aid posters. We still make workbooks and manuals and send them to printers for clients. We also make really cool courses that have cars chasing each other down the road, which is pretty fun too. And then, I mean, sitting on my desk, I've got this incredibly expensive but awesome device, the Apple Vision Pro that I just got last week, because we want to look at if there's something there in terms of mixed reality, and what happens if you can have training content visible to you while you're actually working. So instead of, even a great tool like Opus, where you can really learn in the flow of work, having something like this is something that you can work in the flow of learning. Did I just invent something there? Um, so will somebody write that down? That was
Yeah,
great.
I got you.
Thanks. So yeah, I think you got to use the tools. I geek out on design, and every pixel to me matters in a storyline course, and every word to me matters when we're scripting out content. Like, I really get down in the details of that. But I also, just because we serve so many clients at once, and they could be 2 units and getting excited to grow to 3, or they could be a global national brand that is expanding in new markets, or just saying, is our training at the level that it needs to be? I spend so much time in that space of just thinking about the strategy. And that's why I developed this, that Trello board, to help everybody have a takeaway today. It was just making sure that, first of all, are you grounded in what you really need to be spending time on? And once you are, then have fun with the tools and make some really great content that builds a really great learning experience.
I'm flipping back to share the Trello board because it really is a gold mine in terms of just having this as like a resource. The next time you go to build training, walk through each of these questions that Matt and his team so thoughtfully put together.
Yeah. And so, I mean, when we do this internally, when we're working with clients, there's like 1,000 points of data that we might touch on. And this is kind of a light version of that, but it does have some really good breadth. And so I wrote these all as prompts, just for everyone here in this webinar. I created this as a tool for you to take away. I'm sure it'll be available forever. I invite you to check it out. But I wrote them as prompts so you can ask yourselves, whatever you're working on, is it a piece of content, a large initiative, just evaluating what your current state is, dreaming about what your future state is, in all those situations, you can use this and walk through these prompts and ask yourself really important questions that I think sometimes we rush past a little bit. Even just in the first list there of the stakeholders, if you go down to that bottom card, we know that we're changing. We get asked for a lot, make us a training program for managers or make us a training program for hourly team members. Yeah, we do that, but we have to remember that the people leading those people are going to have their work experience and their leadership experience and their training management experience change as well. So just thinking about who all the stakeholders are, I think my favorite list on this board is the alignment one. And there's so many different things that training has to be aligned to that while I was writing this list, I thought I came up with a couple that I haven't been thinking about, or at least as much as I should have. So what is your brand? What do people think of when they think of you? And what are you promising? I mean, your learning needs to align with that. A sense of belonging. Is it accessible? Is it approachable? Is it for global, multiple markets? Is it translated, localized? Is it, inclusive and intended for diverse audiences because your teams are diverse? So the content has to be that way too. What does your employment experience look like and what could it look like? What's your storytelling? What ROI do you want out of this on the business? So, and then even just that next one of what environments do we train in? Is your learning experience great at openings, but not great for existing locations? How does it compare between corporate and franchise? Do you have different segments that you operate in as one concept where you have, a counter service or a ghost kitchen and you have a full service wrapped up in the same concept? Are you multi-concept? Do you operate in different markets? So don't get overwhelmed. Like, you don't have to answer all this in an hour, but I think if some of these prompts just help guide a little bit of your decision making and your strategic planning, and certainly your current state evaluation, I think it'll be really helpful.
Ashley, I want to give you the floor in case you have any. Are there questions on this board that you would pick three that resonate with you, or ones or that you would prioritize in your workflow?
Yeah, I think when we first met together, Matt and I and you, and just were talking about this concept as a whole, I think we both kind of tangented and geeked out a little bit about something that even I this past week realized I wasn't doing as well, which is aligning to your brand standards and your brand guidelines. And that's happened so often where I'll start and I'm the first person who ever asked for a whole storyboard of what are your stylistic requirements. But also the brand promise really sticks out for me. And I think Matt, you had a great example of someone starting in a role and saying that I'm working in my dream job. And I think it was Krispy Kreme. But It made me remember starting here, this was a dream opportunity for me because I was moving out of working in a heavy meat bread type situation into something that felt more aligned to my home values of better food made better for you because better tastes better. And it just aligned to how I live my life. And I eat salads every day. Even though I'm not near a truck, I still eat salads every day. And so as someone starting out, this was my dream. How do I make sure that someone else feeling that same way coming in, they're this is going to be so exciting. I could have worked at McDonald's, but I'm working in a place like Chopped where it's still quick and easy, but it's really helping people eat better food with really good ingredients. Do they feel that same excitement then when they come into training? Am I continuing that excitement for them? Or am I letting them down a little bit where they're this isn't what I thought it was going to be? They're not focusing as much on the ingredients and they're not focusing as much on their commitment to the brand. And I felt very called out on in a good way of how do I make sure I'm aligning that and keeping this their dream job.
That was something that you bring up such a good point. That was something we discussed in a webinar that we had last fall with Angela Gintz from Salt and Straw, and she looks at the customer experience and the guest experience as almost one and the same, because before, she was like, chances are anybody who has ever come and applied for a job here, they probably bought ice cream here before. So the experiences should be really similar. Our employees were probably customers first.
Yeah, we missed that at the beginning here. We're talking about what is great content. Quickly, there's an emotional component to greatness too, and a connection component. So, look, there's lots of work to do. There's lots of questions to answer. There's lots of content to build. But make sure you all give yourself a little bit of space to dream a little bit too, and think about, is this fun? Do I love it here? And hopefully that comes through in all the training that you're creating.
Great. So we have 5 minutes left. I want to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to ask our panelists a question if they have one. If not, I'll give you a few minutes. You can drop it in the chat. You can request a call-in.
And if you're just in stunned silence, I'm sure that we can find a way to reconnect another time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Ashley, Matt, I want to thank you so much for being part of this webinar session. As for what's next, join us in stunned silence. Thank you. I think I pick up like a new term every time I host one of these. There's always like a one-liner that comes around. Stunned silence might be the one for this. Join us in June.
I can help.
We have two exciting webinars, one on the ROI of food safety and another on continuous learning or everboarding. So if you're subscribed to the Opus newsletter, you'll be able to get first dibs on saving your seat. Learn more about modern training. As I mentioned, we'll have that Trello board in as a resource from the recap. But if you have any questions, you know where to find us. Thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Bye.